What's going on, guys? So if anyone's a newer subscriber, I actually do video game reviews from time to time. It's more rare though because my channel is mainly about movie and film reviews, except from time to time I will actually review a game that I'm interested in playing, and that's really what it is. I only review games that I actually want to play because I'm not going to sit around and play every game that comes out because it's just so expensive and it's not really worth it. But I do have a video game collection, mostly retro style games. I have N64, NES, Super Nintendo, and after I made my Blu-ray collection video recently, a lot of people were like, Chris, why don't you show us some of your video games? Because you're obviously into that too, but we'd like to know what you think. So I'm going to take a trip down memory lane with you guys into my childhood as I talk to you about the system that is most nostalgic for me, my very first ever video game system that I owned, Nintendo 64. It basically holds all of my favorite childhood memories in regards to video games. I would play Nintendo 64 with my friends, and Super Nintendo and NES for sure, but Nintendo 64 was the one where we were like, wow, 3D gaming, and it just really ushered in this new era at its time. It was the last cartridge-based system, so that's pretty cool. A lot of things about Nintendo 64 are very special to me. I had all the Nintendo Power magazines, which I still have. The way I got my Nintendo 64 was, for a long time as a kid, I wanted a basketball hoop because I've always been a fan of basketball and I play basketball quite often. But when I was a kid, I always wanted one in my driveway, and my parents finally bought me one in like 1995. And then we ended up moving from that house and we couldn't keep the hoop, and my parents felt bad because I had finally gotten one, and they said, you know what, since we can't keep your hoop as a consolation, we're gonna get you a Nintendo 64. And to me, that was like the greatest thing ever. And from then on, I had the best childhood ever, and the Nintendo 64 that you have been seeing in my videos is that one all the way back from 1996 when I bought it. When my parents bought it. I was a child. So let's get started showing you my collection. I don't have like a humongous collection. I have a fair amount, and I have some of the best ones out there in alphabetical order, starting with 1080. I was just doing the voice from the opening. See, the thing about 1080 snowboarding is what it's, I guess, technically called. Everyone just called it 1080. Is I wasn't really into sports games, but this game was so cool when it first came out because of the 3D graphics, because you could actually feel as if you were snowboarding, the fun techno music. I just really enjoyed this game as a kid, and I had a lot of fun playing it. Basically tried to master like every single one of the courses. Now let me explain something about my game collection. I have them encased in these really beautiful plastic collector's cases, which I got from a very cool website called Custom Game Cases. So this website is pretty cool for me because until I'm like 55 years old, have a mansion, and am incredibly rich, I'm not going to be able to afford to case all of my games with the original boxes and instruction manuals. That website, Custom Game Cases, allowed me to case my entire collection for a very good deal, and they look beautiful, and it makes me feel like I'm back in Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, like actually looking through the titles and everything, and I can enjoy the cases. If you guys want to check out that website to case some of your older games, they do NES, Super Nintendo, all different types of games. Let them know that Chris sent you. The link is in the description below because it's very reasonable, and I was actually able to case my entire collection for a very good deal, so I definitely suggest checking them out. It's pretty awesome. The next game in my collection is one that maybe most people don't remember. I played it because I was really into like bug killing games when I was a teenager, and I still kind of am actually. Whenever they make a game like just kill all the bugs, I'm like, yes, because I hate bugs. Armorines. This was a game that, like I said, not too many people probably remember. Oddly, they decided to give it a black case. I'm not sure why this game in particular got a different case. Now these next three I'm actually going to group into one thing. I have Army Men Air Combat, Army Men Sarge's Heroes, and Army Men Sarge's Heroes 2. I am kind of a humongous fan of the Army Men franchise. I wish they'd make more of them nowadays, and I don't know what it is. I just find it entertaining to play as the little plastic guys going through household objects. And one of my favorite Army Men games actually isn't on the N64, it was on the GameCube. It was Army Men RTS. It was basically like Command and Conquer for Army Men. I don't know what it was about those games as a kid. I even bought Army Men toys and made little Army Men short films out in the woods, and my friends and I got a kick out of doing that. Something about those games just got me. I think it was the Toy Story element where you could control toys and they had their own little world, and like a cup on the ground was a base. I just find that pretty entertaining. I don't know why. The next two games on my list are pretty awesome. They're pretty nostalgic for me and others I'm sure as well. These games are getting more and more rare and more expensive, retro games in general. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to case my entire collection so I could keep them safe from dust and discoloration and whatnot. But Banjo-Kazooie and BanjoTooie is what I want to talk about right now. These are also two games as a kid that I don't know what it was. Like, Rareware came out with so many great games in that time period, which we'll talk more about some of them later, that were just so immersive, and these huge worlds with beautiful colored graphics enhanced by the expansion pack on the Nintendo 64, which, you know, after a while they made it so like certain games could only be played on the expansion pack. BanjoTooie is more expensive now than Kazooie. Not sure why. It's like there are fewer copies of it out there, or more people kept it or something. I don't know. Here's a game in my collection that I in particular played that not a lot of other people did. It was kind of like I played it and my friends played it for a while, but I never really heard anyone else talking about this game. I picked it up at an older store that I don't see around anymore called Value City. I remember back in the day it was like $20 there. You can find it now for probably like $5. Body Harvest, another bug killing game, which, like I said, in the late 90s there were a whole bunch of them and people really enjoyed them, myself included. Body Harvest was this time traveling game where you could go back in time to stop a bug invasion that would eventually take over the earth. It's not a perfect game at all. None of these games, I have games on here that aren't good, like that I know that they're just kind of nostalgic for me. Speaking of games that aren't really that great but are nostalgic for me, Chopper Attack. Now, Chopper Attack, you could control a helicopter and basically destroy all enemies in a field. That was the one mission objective. You know, certain games, if you just played them for the first time now, there's no way you'd be like, it's okay. But when you connect to the whole childhood nostalgia to it, it definitely enhances the experience. My next game on the list is probably the only real-time strategy game that I have for Nintendo 64. They didn't make too many of them. They made StarCraft 64, which is getting harder and harder to find nowadays, but they also made a game called Command & Conquer, which was a port from the PC version. My biggest memory with this game is I spent the night at my friend's house, and we stayed up pretty late, and then all of a sudden we were like, hey, why don't we go to bed fairly early? And by fairly early, we meant like 1 a.m. maybe. So we could actually get up and then play Command & Conquer at like 10 and have a whole bunch of time to play it all day. And we actually did that, which was really rare for my friends. When we would always stay up till like 4 or 5, 6 in the morning. We were like, hey, you gotta leave at like 3 p.m., right? Right, okay, so why don't we actually go to bed fairly early, and then we can wake up and play Command & Conquer for like 5 hours. And we did it, and we had a lot of fun playing it. Now the next game on the list I can't really talk about without thinking about the theme music. It's impossible. Like every single time I look at this game, all I think of is Cruising! Yeah, okay, I'm done. Cruising USA is not a very good game. It has like retro 80s porn music in it. Like there's seriously a song where a girl's just like, ooh, ah, ooh, ah. Ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh, yeah. Like, I would literally be playing this game hoping that my mom wouldn't listen too close to the door and be like, what are you doing in your room? Because Cruising USA has 80s retro porn music in it. But I had a lot of fun with this game as a kid because my friends would come over and we would cruise the USA. You could go to like each big place in the USA and try to do the race and everything. Now this next game on my list is one of the most famous Nintendo 64 games. This is one of the first games, in fact it may actually be the first game to require the expansion pack. It actually came with the game. It was a little more expensive because of that, and that is Donkey Kong 64. See, expansion pack included. Donkey Kong 64 was another humongous hit by Rareware. This game was huge. I'll be honest with you, I still have not fully completed this game. Like, if you want to actually get like 100% everything, you have to spend, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in this game. It's extremely challenging. It's just one of those big roaming worlds where you can run around as Donkey Kong. The levels seemed huge as a kid, like just so expansive. Nowadays we have all these games like The Last of Us and Batman Arkham City where you can just run around everywhere. But these levels, when you were a kid, it just felt so big. Now this next game I actually didn't play as much when I was a kid, but I became more of a fan of it as I grew up, and that is Excitebike 64. See, there was an original game on the NES called Excitebike that was really popular for its time and really well received. Excitebike, that's a hard title to say. Excitebike 64 was a pretty fun game with really good graphics. It had really good control too. That's one of the things I noticed. I played this game like a couple days ago just to kind of play through some of my games again so I could prepare for this video. And I couldn't believe how good the control was. Like I really felt like I was controlling a bike. These next two games are also racing games that I was a big fan of as a kid. Extreme G 1 and 2. It's filled with techno music, filled with these really fast-paced futuristic tracks that I had a lot of fun playing as a kid, and still nowadays this game has excellent replay value, in particular the first one. The second one is still pretty fun, but the first one was always the best for me. When I was younger, these were some of the first really fast-paced racing games that I played, because even nowadays when I play it, the tracks still feel pretty eye-burning, you know, it gets into your retinas. The next game on my list is not just one of the best Nintendo 64 games, it is one of the best video games ever made, period. one of the most revolutionary video games ever made, one of the most influential video games ever made. If you ever sat down and played Call of Duty, if you ever sat down and played any first-person shooter that you had fun with, you have GoldenEye to thank for that, because this game is the game that invented intense multiplayer first-person shooter matches where you got together with your friends and you screamed at the computer all night as your friend cheated with the rocket launcher or got Oddjob and threw his hat at you.
Load a rumble pack.
You know how to use one of these?
And see how it feels when 007 meets N64.
And it's not just the multiplayer that was so great about this game. The solo missions are actually extremely fun. Certain games, you can tell that like one thing is better than the other. Maybe the solo is better, maybe the multiplayer is better. This game has equally fantastic everything. The soundtrack is so awesome. The graphics were very good for its time. The reaction from them as they got shot was cool. I remember as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, like you can shoot them in the leg and they bend down and hold their leg. Like, it was crazy good graphics and enemy reaction at the time that it came out. And it's probably still the best game that was based off of a movie that's ever come out, because generally those really suck hard. If you haven't played it, that's pretty crazy, because you should. Now, I don't really consider this game a sequel to GoldenEye, but I mean, I guess technically The World Is Not Enough is a sequel to it. It was taken over by a different company, EA Games, and they gave the game a blue cartridge. It fell out. It's still a fun game, though. It's definitely not a bad game. It's just compared to the first one, it was like nothing. Okay, now my next game is probably the most rare Nintendo 64 game that I have. I spent a long time looking for this. I finally found it used for $50. I traded in some things to this guy and I got it for $11. Harvest Moon 64. Definitely one of the most hard to find Nintendo 64 games out there, and the reason for that is because the company that produced this game just didn't think it would sell that well, because it's such a weird genre. You know, not too many gamers are going to be interested in playing Harvest Moon 64, so they didn't make that many copies of it. I vividly remember going to Blockbuster when I was a kid and buying it for $2.99. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Whatever, I have it now, and I'm extremely glad I have it. It's a farming life simulator, you know, and I really have a lot of fun with games like that, because so many games nowadays, it's like, let's just shoot everything, let's blow everything up, okay, that's great. How about we plant some seeds and take care of my dog and meet some people in the town and grow some fruit? Like, they don't make games like that anymore unless it's a Harvest Moon game, of course. And this game is incredibly nostalgic for me, and I'm so glad that I have it, because it took me a long time to find it. My next game is more than likely the most nostalgic game I have. I don't know what it is about this game. I absolutely adored everything about this game when it came out in 1999. The soundtrack to this day is still, I think, one of the best game soundtracks ever made. It's by Rareware. It's another bug-killing game. It was so immersive and incredibly long, and the graphics were so impressive when I was a kid. I, to this day, still haven't gotten enough of Force Gemini. I don't know what it is. Like, something about this game just makes me so happy. Whether you play as the man Juno, the dog Lupus, or the girl Vela, you can control them all to go across these planets to beat the actual game. The game was released along with Donkey Kong 64 at almost the exact same time, both by Rareware, and Donkey Kong kind of overshadowed this game, and that's one of the reasons why it didn't receive the success that I think it personally deserves. I think it's one of the most underrated games ever made. Now, my next two games on my list are some of the most popular games ever created. Many people refer to one of them, at least, as possibly the best video game ever made, and that game is Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time, one of the most immersive, all-out, humongous worlds where you truly felt as if you were just in a world. You could control Link, you could go to all these different places, these forests, these castles, these dungeons. It was so incredible, and oh my god, the water temple. Don't even get me started on the water temple. Ugh. The version of this game that I do have is the gold cartridge. It is so beautiful, look at that. And its sequel, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, continued in its reign of awesome. The cartridge that I have for this one is the lenticular holographic gold one, which is so cool because that's pretty hard to find nowadays. These games are getting harder and harder to find and more expensive. And they both had this awesome kind of creepy vibe to it. You know, like in the first one, the skeletons would come out at night. The second one, you had all those masks and the moon was in the sky with that face. Now, before I even tell you what the title of my next game is, I just want to say that when you shoot someone in this game, you hear a voice that actually goes like, "Way to go!" Way to go! I don't know why that's in Mission Impossible, but Mission Impossible, man. I'm a big fan of the franchise, okay? This game came out. It's fun. It's not a terrible game, actually, by any means. It actually isn't a terrible game. It's just, it has like these really cheesy elements to it. The amazing, like, 1990s I got shot sound effect. Arrgh! They were in like every game back in the day. You play as Ethan Hunt, you do various missions that are somewhat like the movie, and then there are these random ones that have nothing to do with it. It's an entertaining game. It's more nostalgic for me probably than it is special. Here's a drinking game for you. Take a drink every time I say nostalgic in this video. You'll get pretty hammered. Now, following GoldenEye, people were very keen to emulate that success, and very few people did it correctly, but one game actually did it very well. And it just so happens to be from the makers of GoldenEye, Rareware, so that works because Perfect Dark is probably the second best first-person shooter on the Nintendo 64. In fact, it definitely is, and it is one of the best FPSs ever made for sure. They made a more mature version of it with more blood. I remember I played it, I was like, this is basically GoldenEye with a girl, which is awesome. Oh, but blood pools beneath them. Wow. Before I show you what the next game is, let me explain this is actually the very first video game I was ever given. My first exposure to this game was when I went to Blockbuster and they had a TV set up with a Nintendo 64 controller and you could play a version of this game. And I thought it was just the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, and my parents bought it for me back when it was $50, and that game is Star Fox 64. This game has some of the best replay value I have ever encountered in my life. I love hearing Falco make jokes about how he's awesome and how Fox is dumb. I guess I should be thankful. And have Peppy constantly getting his butt kicked. They're on me! I'm getting careless! Thanks, Fox. And have Slippy scream like a little girl. In fact, for the longest time when I was a kid, I thought Slippy was a girl. Star Fox 64 is one of the coolest rail-based games ever, and that's where, you know, a thing is controlling you on a certain path. You can't deviate from it. You just have to shoot as many of the ships as you can in one. I eventually got all the medals on each level, which is controlled by how many enemies you shoot down. Then I got the expert mode, and I got all the medals on that. Like, it's one of those games where you just feel like you have to complete it. This next game on my list was not an official sequel to Star Wars Rogue Squadron, but to me it was. Star Wars Battle for Naboo. This game was a lot of fun. It had the same basic structure as Star Wars Rogue Squadron, but you controlled things that were going on in the Episode 1 universe. Not a lot of people played this as much as Rogue Squadron. I'm not sure why. It's one of the games like Star Fox where you feel the need to complete each level and then get the bronze and silver and gold medals and even platinum. There's a platinum medal. Also coming from the Star Wars Episode 1 universe was Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. A racing game, you know, you did the pod races, you could be Anakin, you could be other characters. One thing about Episode 1 for sure, the games for it definitely had a special place for me as a kid because I loved playing those games, Battle for Naboo and Racer. If you tap R over and over again, you can hear Anakin say stuff, just to let you know. And I was referring to it earlier, and here it is, Star Wars Rogue Squadron. One of the best Star Wars games ever made, and one of the most entertaining ship shooting, whatever the genre is, games. Definitely a game with incredible replay value. You could play this game over and over again and still feel the need to play it. Like Battle for Naboo, like Star Fox, these shooting in the sky with ship games really made me feel the need to be a completist about it and do everything you could do and beat every level and get all the gold medals and everything. And my last Star Wars game on this list, and I believe the only Star Wars game on the Nintendo 64 that I have not talked about, is Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Now this game is weird because it stars Dash Rendar. Who's that? He's the guy from the Shadows of the Empire book. It has characters in it that you're not sure, like, who are these people? Prince Shizor, I guess is how you say it. As a kid, I was like, Exior? What does that mean? But as soon as you're running around as Dash Rendar through Gal Spaceport, just shooting stormtroopers off of cliffs, and you hear them do that great, whatever that sound is, I don't know. It's awesome. Now, for many people, the next game I'm going to talk about is the game that people played for the very first time on the Nintendo 64. The very first experience people had with real 3D graphics. I mean, there were other games that were 3D, like Star Fox for the Super Nintendo, but this game is really the first time where someone put it in and went, wow, I don't even know what I've been missing. Because in all honesty, I think possibly the biggest jump in graphics was probably from Super Nintendo to Nintendo 64. I mean, they were just such a huge jump. I mean, from GameCube to Wii and from PS2 to PS3, it's a big jump, but going from playing Super Mario World on the Super NES to playing Super Mario 64, people were pooping all over the place and spreading it across the walls and like across their face because they were like freaking out and turning into crazy people. That probably didn't happen. Maybe it did in somebody's house. I don't know. But popping in this game as a kid and running around just outside the castle where you just wandered around and hopped on trees and stuff and looked at a cat. It was just like, what is this? Like, it was just such a great experience. Another game where I felt like a completist, where I had to get all 120 stars, which I did do. This game had so many great level designs, and it was just the right amount of challenging, where you didn't hate yourself, but it wasn't easy. And that's another great thing about this game. Revolutionary in every way, so many games have modeled themselves after this. Now when I was a kid, there were two games in particular that I viewed as the ultimate multiplayer experiences. One of them we had already talked about, that's GoldenEye 64, and the other one is Super Smash Bros. This game introduced playing as Nintendo characters and beating the crap out of each other. It was insanely awesome. Like, no one expected it to be as good as it was. Everyone was like picturing this Street Fighter one-on-one, this one moving like, it wasn't anything like that. The idea of being able to have moves that you knew these guys could do and pulling them off correctly, and like when you just barely make it back to a stage, hearing the crowd go, "Oh!" You got the feeling that people were actually like watching these matches. That added to it as well. Every single game since then has improved upon it also. That's a great thing about that series. Melee was better than this, Brawl was better than that. That's my opinion, of course. I'm not a huge fighter game fan. Like, fighting games are fine, I don't have anything wrong with them. But this is truly, I think, one of the best fighting games ever made because it changed the way fighting games could be done. Now nowadays I would never play a game like this. I would never just pick up a random sporting game that I don't care about, but for some reason in the 90s, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was extremely popular to the point of people who didn't skate, like myself, loved it. Like, I loved playing this game. I've never rode a skateboard correctly in my life, but I for some reason really enjoyed playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. It had a blue cartridge, which was pretty cool. It had cool music, it had cool sound effects, it had good graphics for its time, and a really fun skating system that obviously started a humongous franchise. Now the only game I have in this series is my favorite one, and that is Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. Eventually I'll probably get some of the other ones. This game really improved upon the first one. The dinosaur graphics were better, the interacting with them was better, it was more fun as a first-person game. This is probably the best one in the series, I think. Now I have very vivid memories with a game called Wave Race 64. This game for me, I played this game with a buddy of mine in his attic quite often because he had it but I didn't. He had his Nintendo 64 in his attic and we would play this game and try to beat all the various time trials over and over again. Another game that for some reason Nintendo 64 had this thing for me where I don't care about jet skiing, but I love playing this game. Terrific, really impressive water graphics. One of the first times I ever looked at water and thought, wow, that water looks really real. Now lastly here I have a couple loose games that aren't boxed yet. I will eventually pick up boxes for them. But those games are Pilot Wings 64, a flight simulator game where you could take control of these people and basically do these various tests as you flied with these wings and piloted them with wings, pilot wings. Shadowgate 64, Trials of the Four Towers. I actually have not played this game yet. I bought this off of somebody from Craigslist for a very good price. I looked up some gameplay videos about it and it really interested me, so I'm going to play this very soon. And last but not least, Vigilante 8, a game in which you could control a school bus and blast other cars into oblivion. It was kind of like Twisted Metal, except slightly different. It was like the 70s retro style game that had all these in-jokes in there and aliens. I enjoyed all these games very much. Nintendo 64 is extremely nostalgic for me. It's a system that I play quite often. There's a reason it's behind me in all of my videos. I hope you guys did enjoy this. If you like this, I'm planning on making one for my Nintendo and Super Nintendo collection as well. That's not as big, so I'm gonna actually bunch both of those into the same video. If you'd like me to, of course, if you enjoyed this. From time to time, I want to do video game things, not as often. Movies are my main focus, but I'm also a gamer at heart, so I hope you guys did enjoy this video. And I am interested in knowing, do you guys have a gamer story, a game story that maybe is nostalgic to you, some game in particular that means a lot to you as a kid or maybe as an adult? What's your gamer story? Because I basically just told you mine. And as always, if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.